and the same thing is for French Jews, and for for any minority that has gone through historical persecution, you know, if America wants to be the beacon of hope for all mankind, then, for example, the Chinese people should be helped, and the Americans should intervene for all Chinese people to minimize the effects of corruption in the Chinese government, to minimize the effects of the communist regime there, to strengthen the opposition to the communism that is, at least the aspects within the communist regime in China, which are withholding success of the Chinese people. You look very cute. Um, and
Um,
now you're back.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, China. I do hear that. I guess from people that the Chinese government is getting a little bit better than they used to be in terms of like human rights, freedom, uh, like maybe like suffrage and things like that. That's just what I've heard from some of the people I talk to. On the other hand, we're going through a lot in the United States right now. I don't want to go into details, but obviously, um, we're becoming a more and more integrated world where the countries are like the different body parts that we have in the human body. That's the way I look at it, at least. Um, your left hand, right hand, your feet, your legs, and everything. And that's why I was trying to develop a model of Kabbalah and Chinese medicine that looks at the world, the different countries, as if it was one body. It could be two bodies, It could be like two bodies, like one male and one female, or it could be one body and the aliens are like the females or something, if there are aliens around. But the idea is that if we're one body, there needs to be separation, but at the same time we got to work together as one country. Yeah, it's not like a world peace, lovey-dovey. Oh, peace to everybody, it's not like that. There's a balance between separation and unity, between peace and some level of arguments and conflicts in this world. Just because, it's a balance thing. I think if it's too peaceful, people would look for a way to be not peaceful. And I think that touches on the topic of racism as well, because I think racism, I like to be, spiritual and somewhat look at this from a Torah standpoint. From the point where they say that Hashem divided the people into different language groups and everything. And if you look at the Aryan race that Hitler talked about, it's actually a linguistic group. Aryan is not really like it's technically not a skin color. They say it's blonde, blue-eyed, and things like that, but it's technically a linguistic group that came from India. And supposedly, I guess he relates it to the blonde, blue-eyed people, which is also kind of interesting. Maybe you might know more about it. That Hitler himself is not that. He's a group or something. But anyway, so the fact that God, Hashem, divided people into different groups, there's I think in Judaism there's a lot of the good and the bads. The bad thing is that there is separation and there's sometimes wars and conflicts and things like that. But the good thing is that I think every time there's a separation, there's creation, there's growth. And we have grown a lot. And without that separation, without that linguistic separation that we had, and maybe racial that goes along with it, we might not have airplanes by today. We might not have the buildings, the skyscrapers we have today. Maybe we can live without it. That's arguable. But because of the separation, and because of the wars we had in the past, and the veterans, the soldiers that did a great job of keeping that separation, we're able to create something that's great. But I think the concept of Geula and redemption is that we've done a lot of growing already. There comes to a time in our lives where we stop growing. And that usually has a negative connotation sometimes. Oh, you stop growing, you stop learning, you stop growing. But when you stop growing, you're enjoying, you're maintaining. You're growing a garden. You stop. Once a flower stops growing, it's something to be enjoyed. And I think that's what the Messianic ages is all about, is a time to reap the fruits that we planted, so to speak. And that's why I'm supporting. That's why that's why I think the concept of Mashiach is so important.
But
Um,
mentioning flowers, just to take that parable of when you cut the flower and then you bring it into the house, then you can enjoy it. But think about it a little deeper. Adam and Eve, when they were in the Garden of Eden, their job was to take care of the garden, and they didn't have to bring the flowers into their house, right?
right,
They just needed to trim and make sure that everything looked nice, and
right.
then and the garden would be beautiful. So the same thing is, I think that if we hustle the world properly, we will be able to enjoy its benefits without needing to cut anything down, kind of. Um, because I really do wish that comes a day in society where people don't have to die in order for other people to live. Um, there must be a way to properly educate and to harmoniously balance. And like you were saying, the body it has many different body parts, and the separation between the heart and the liver from the kidneys, and the kidneys from every part of the body is compartmentalized and has its own domain and has its own trump wall around it to make sure that it's not infiltrated or leaked or whatnot. So compartmentalization does not necessarily mean hate.
Who are the
Compartmentalization does not necessarily mean a lack of empathy or a lack of cooperation. There are the channels within the body that are in charge of transferring goods from one place to another. And I think that the same thing is in the world. There are the veins and that transfer the blood. There are the transportation, the boats that bring the stuff uh, from China to America, and the things that cross from Mexico to the United States. But of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be done in a bad way. It has to be done in a natural way. Just like in the body, the right way to dispose of food is through the back and not through throwing up. And if someone throws up all his food, then that's a problem. Same thing. Uh, the right way for Mexicans to make it to America is on a nice plane, um, business class, um, and to get a tourist visa, and then to upgrade that to citizenship, and to do it in the proper manner. Crossing the border and taking the risk of dying of drought in the Mexican deserts is not necessarily a convenient way. It's like throwing up. It's an unhealthy um, way of
It's
of
not a.
yeah.
What about is stay behind? You know, yeah, I totally agree. I think, yeah, um, I definitely agree that the Mexicans should pay for it. I'm kidding, but
No, it's not so much who should pay for it. That's like saying, I mean,
yeah,
if we are
it's
truly one body, then the body automatically syncs by itself.
exactly.
He
You
knows
got
where his strengths are and his weaknesses are, and the body works it out.
exactly. Yeah, it's like well, the way I mapped it out is I have a Facebook group called the Triple Burner. I invited you, a couple other people. It's when I put it together, the first thing I realized is that it's really loaded. It's really hard to explain what I'm trying to explain. But one of the concept is like I said, dividing the countries into different body parts and everything. But there is a way where uh, the countries interact with each other. We talked about how Africa could be the Malchut and Keter. We talked about how, depending on what you look at, and a lot of it is archetypical. It's not like, oh, Africa has to be Malchut. It's like, okay, up and down. It's like, it's not like, oh, that is up, and that, that table right there is up, and that, chair right there is down. Everywhere you go, there's an up and down. Everywhere you go, there is a concept of Malchut, Meketa, and everything. And one of the things that was interesting is that the way I laid it out, I mean, we're talking a little bit about Chinese feng shui. Whether you believe or follow that stuff, but the idea is that we're creating a bridge between the cultural gaps. I mean, between the cultures. There's the concept that West is children and East is family. So West, you got like the American culture. In the East, you got the American culture. So West, you'll have the West. Excuse me. Trying to think. The West would be. It's either. I think the West. Yeah, the West should be a Tiferet and a Yesod. And sometimes you'll find where like the Yesod intersects with the Hod and Nitzach. But anyways, but one question. One thing I do want to ask is I do want to touch upon it a little bit. I know this is a little bit off topic, but since we're talking about the West being children and family, I think children and everything, in my observations and also experience is that there is a commonality between Islam and Christianity, and there's a commonality between Judaism and Chinese culture. And the interesting thing is that if you look at the texts alone, not how people practice it, but the texts, Islam and Christianity actually gives children rights. Judaism and Chinese culture doesn't really give as much on the texts.
Look, Schwan, this is like a very broad concept. And it could be, very versatile as well. Because just to take an example, the Rebbe of Lubavitch was heavily involved in children. The Rebbe made a special Tzivot Hashem, which is the army of God, and gave an emphasis on the children, and made special rallies. And for the children, the Rebbe himself would join at these children's rallies in 770, and the Rebbe made a very big dagesh, a very big stress, and the Rebbe also on children fulfilling the mitzvot. Even from 3 years old, the Rebbe said that Jewish girls should light Shabbos candles with the supervision of an adult, of course. But
I see a lot of Jewish people, like I said, practice and preach is usually different in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could find. I'm sure that there's another thing. With all this, turmoil going on, this is like with so many cultures up for grabs and so many cultures exposing what they have to offer to the world right now, for the better or for the worse. Islam is obviously doing a terrible job at PR at this point. They have terrible PR. They have public relations.
The Western world, I think, especially, yeah.
Yeah, is down the drain, and they're to the point that the Western world feels it easy to manipulate them, to try to take down Assad, for example, and they're doing a great job at it. They're just paying Muslim mercenaries to bomb Assad and do terrible things. So the world is an upside down kind of, and at this point, I think that just like a lot of people are stuck in the election cycle of Donald Trump, they still haven't cashed in on the left and on the right the fact that the president is president. It's not the election cycle anymore. He is the president, and now there are real problems, and they need to be addressed. They need to be solved, and we need to get progress on the left and on the right in America. The same thing is, I think that right now we are reaching a climax where morals, ethics, Judaism, and the good things that Christianity learned from Judaism, the Judeo-Christian alliance, kind of, if you might say, to protect the lost and displaced people of Israel, the refugees of the Holocaust, the refugees of the concentration camps, the refugees of the ovens, the refugees of all the Arab nations. My grandparents are from Morocco. I'm sure my great grandfather had a nice big house in Morocco. but that doesn't matter at this point because we kind of left to Israel, and if I go back to Morocco, I'm not gonna have a nice big house there. So I'm technically a refugee of Morocco, even though we're talking generations later. But the point that I'm trying to bring out here is that at this point exactly, instead of the Jewish people, the moral people, the ethical people like you, and people that study the deeper wisdoms of ethics and morals in the world, whether it's Kabbalah in a positive way, in the enlightened path, in the true light, and not in the real Messiah, not the bogus things that were created as Rome fell or whatnot. Um, the authenticity of the Old Testament has has to now take its position into the world, and anyone that has now um, the right ideas of truth has to join the Mashiach government. The Mashiach government has to become a reality in the world because right now there are so many people so perplexed, so confused. They're all looking for direction, and we have it in our hands like this. We have the seven laws of Noah, which, if only would be more popular, if only would be more mainstream, if only CNN would be forced to talk about it because there was a great Seven Laws of Noah event in Times Square where 5 million people sat down and listened to the Seven Laws of Noah be taught, and if morals and ethics would rock the world and force all other elements in the world to join in, then we would start to see the narrative move in the direction that we want it to and that everyone wants to. Because believe me, I mean, conservatives are not really interested in needing to explain the same talking points over and over about how they deserve to own a gun. And CNN is not interested all day, regurgitating talking points about Russia. And Trump is not interested all day going around tapping the right people on the back for protecting and serving this country. There are so many, innovations just waiting to be busted open and just waiting to make our lives, change. Just like, when cars were invented, people were worried that all the wagon drivers are going to run out of business, but they just became taxi drivers. And when the computers were invented, so all the painters and all the accountants were worried, but now accountants work with Excel and the painters work with graphic designing. So the jobs are going to increase. If
Yeah,
robots are introduced into the
yeah.
world, there's going to be new jobs that are going to take their place, and we don't have to worry about it. The question is, do we want to be a third world country or do we want to advance? And as long as we're grilling and grinding um, ridiculous talking points and wasting our energies um, proposing controversial topics, um, then we're not going to get anywhere fast enough. We need to talk about, I mean, the thing is, we need to get popular topics. On the forefront of humanity, of society. We need to make Seven Laws of Noah popular. We need to make the Mashiach government a popular concept that all the true people in the world can join it, and have a way to, as become members of this group. And again, because it's a novel concept, right now there aren't a lot of rules to it, and that basically means that many people can join and that the movement will mold itself. Now, obviously, there's been many movements. There's Anonymous, and then there's 4chan, and there's many different groups in the world and societies. But I mean, I'm not looking to make another niche group or niche society or a secret culture. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in making Mashiach popular again in the world and the concepts of redemption popular as is written in the Old Testament. And we can figure out, like there's people waiting for the Christian Mashiach, they can wait. And there's people waiting for the Jewish Mashiach, the real Jewish Mashiach, they can wait. and it's not about so much the outcome. It's more about seeing what we can learn and what we can do to make the future greater. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to be talking about gun laws and about fake news and about the next big scam that the government is planning against us, I mean, the government really needs to stand down and allow the people to offer them a healthy concept. And you know, why am I so worried about what's the connection between Mashiach government and the Kabbalah Chinese wisdom, for example? The answer is that if American society is more interested in, you know, the double McBurger, then
Hey,
you
I mean, you got to
you
be interested in double McGurk though. I mean, that's pretty important.
yeah, okay. But they have to be just as interested in that as they are in listening to you and me talk. They have to be just as interested in their mundane as they are in the intellectual war. Um, they have to see that if you neglect the intellectual platform, it will turn into chaos. And it's not something that a person can say, well, I have an older brother which is involved in politics, or well, I have you know, an uncle that he does all the voting for us. Whatever he says, that's what our entire extended family rely on him to know what to vote. It's not about that. This is something that every single person has to be informed. Everyone, just like the entire body has to be involved in the well-being of the brain and of the head and of itself. You know, everyone has
Right.
to contribute in their way. So everyone has to be woke. You know, everyone has to be aware in a real way of the things that are happening, and it has to become. I mean, it already has become in style to a certain extent. Um, to listen to people like Alex Jones, Alternative Media, Mark Dice, Outlaw Morgan, Joseph Paul Watson. You know, these are very famous people, and they're doing a great job of promoting, you know, a healthy mindset, common sense, and they really break it down. They're very, you know, they're a
So
go-to place.
yeah, we were talking about the people like Alex Jones and people like that. Is that it would be? I'm not sure if it's meant to be, but it would be great if we could get, like, say, every Jewish person, if possible, like some kind of outlet to I mean, a lot of Jewish people have Facebook and everything because the Jewish culture, I think it is because it is half Oriental, half Western. It's got that side to it where it's a little bit esoteric, and Jewish people tend to be a little bit more internal rather than
Expressive,
telling
yes.
everybody. For example, you're one of the few people that actually has a thing like that. I don't know, maybe that's what meant to be. But what I like to do is be a voice, like an advocate for the Jewish people, or at least us. What you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is you're an advocate for the Jewish people in a way that I think a lot of Jewish people are not willing to go out in public and like
Yeah, I mean,
reveal their because they're
you're
modest.
100% right. You're absolutely
I was,
right, and I understand them as well.
yeah, it'll be like you're like a beautiful woman or something, but you're she's modest and everything, but we're like this photographers that like I don't know. Okay, I can't think of a better example,
Now
but
here, let me help you. Let me help you out.
um,
Let me help you out. The Jewish people are like a diamond that if you show it to too many people, it will be stolen. So
yeah,
they need a very aggressive salesman to make sure that the sale goes through without it being stolen, you know? So
yeah,
so that's why the voices in Judaism have always been very aggressive people because Judaism has been under attack and it's still under attack ever since its initiation at Mount Sinai. Um, Judaism, you know, way before copyright laws were ever introduced, has been attempted to be hijacked, stolen, redone, replaced, revised. You know,
yeah,
new religions have spawned. New religions that call themselves the continuation of Judaism. new religions that disassociate themselves with Judaism but still hold true to it, new religions that completely do not identify whatsoever with Judaism but take everything they have from Judaism. So we have this long line of abuses of Judaism. So and not only in the mental or spiritual world, but also in the physical world. You know, came a point in history when people that were so fed up with looking at these awesome saintly people called Jews, they were so triggered by this beautiful healthy lifestyle that the Jews have allowed to themselves, they decided that they're just going to kill them all. And how many times in history, you know, we can go on and on about how many times that happened. You know, so today the Jewish people are like, you know what? You guys really, we're trying to be the light onto the nation. We're trying to teach you guys what morals and ethics are. We're trying to teach you guys everything we have. We're trying to give you guidance. And all you guys do is think of another way to blackmail us, think of another way to twist our agenda, think of another way, another religion to combat us. And you know, some people don't mean it in a bad way. I'm sure there's many Christians that, you know, they were brought up Christians, their parents are Christians, their great grandparents are Christians, and they don't mean anything bad to the Jewish people. But the fact that they promote Jesus Christ all day and night as if they know what they're talking about, and I mean, you know, I don't have, you know, I'm gonna pick my hands up right here because again, everything is about the heart, and God truly does look into the heart. And if the Christian man truly believes that what he's doing is the will of God, and he does it without harming others, and he does it in a peaceful manner, then I can excuse him. As long as he doesn't harm others, as long as he does it in a peaceful way, then yeah. But the point is that today the Jewish people have a necessity to be vocal, be expressive, to explain themselves, and to make sense of their history to the world, and to allow the world a piece of the pie of the great benefits of the Messianic era.
Have you seen the movie 300?
300 Spartans?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're kind of like that guy in the end. He lost an eye, but King Leonidas sent him to. He's like, go tell the story of our people, and he's like, he goes back and you know, because the 300 or 299 Spartans died, and this one guy, he's like a lone survivor. He went back. Well, I mean, whatever we call him. He went back and was telling the story. So basically, that's what you're doing is that you're like the one religious Jewish guy that somehow found your path to public speaking, and you're engaged in the world, and you're telling the story that nobody else has ever heard. You know, there are a lot of Jewish entertainers out there. There's a lot of Jewish public people in this world, but most of what they talk about is not Jewish. It's not Judaism. It's not the traditions. It's not the. I mean, it's very understandable. You know, obviously, it's very understandable. You know, why they would do that, but there's not a lot of voice for the ancient side of Judaism, the ancient side of the Jewish culture. And I mean, same thing, and that's relatable to the Chinese people as well, because we kind of, you know, lost a lot of our ancient culture as well. I mean, you know, most Chinese people are not interested in ancient cultures. For example, you know, I tell people as a Chinese flight attendant, my coworkers, after I tell them that I do Tai Chi and like, you know, these Chinese martial arts, these ancient Chinese things, they made fun of me and they told me I'm like a white person. I'm like, first of all, like, you know, like, screw you. Like, what do you mean I'm a white person? And they're like, oh, because, you know, only white people will ever do, like, Tai Chi and things like that. So I was like, because, like, Chinese people have, I think we all have a tendency to leave our home to go elsewhere. And we leave our own culture to go elsewhere. That's why some of the most traditional Chinese people are the people who left China. Because being away from their homeland, they overcompensate by, you know, being more closely attached to the Chinese culture. Where people in China are, you know, they don't really care about the Chinese culture. They don't care. Most of them don't care about martial arts, you know, Taoism, Confucianism, and things like that. And I see the same thing, like, from my observations, and the Jewish people as well. Like some of the most orthodox, traditional Jewish people are the Jews that are away from Israel. Not to say there are not a lot of Orthodox Jews in Israel itself, and not to say there are a lot of Tai Chi masters. These really knowledgeable people in China in the ancient times, but I find that similarity, and I think it's very interesting.
Yeah,
But I
definitely.
see, yeah, I see the way you put it. I think it's a voice that definitely needs to be heard, especially right now. I mean, we're fighting a religious war. I don't think maybe sometimes we don't realize it, or maybe we do, but just don't know how to deal with it. Is that the root of religious war is the religion itself, is the ideas, the concepts, the spirituality that's behind it. You're not going to tell a bunch of Islamic extremists to put down their weapons because we're having tanks and Humvees coming into their house, looking for them in caves and things like that. The only way to deal with this is to address the roots, and unfortunately or fortunately, the root is in religion. And when you're talking about religion, Judaism is obviously, they say Judaism is the oldest religion, or oldest recorded religion of all. And I think broadcasting, giving a voice to these group of people is so important to the world right now. It's so important for the world right now because of the struggles, because of the issues that we're having. The Jews have been a transnational group, ethnicity, and that's very special. That's very unique, and it's also, I think, the source of a lot of anti-Semitism. Back then when a lot of countries are fighting other countries, they're very paranoid of other countries. France is fighting England. There's spying on each other and stuff like that. And
And
now
the
you have
Jews are just walking back and forth like nothing happened.
yeah, exactly. A group of people, they call themselves the Jews, and they're in England, they're in Germany, they're everywhere. It's like, okay, look, we're having wars with these people. Who are you? It's like you're having a high school fight with like a bunch of people, and there's a lot of drama, and there's one person who just, they're friends with everybody. You're like, why are you friends with everybody? There's something wrong with you. It's probably you're the one who's probably behind the scenes and controlling the world and telling people off and things like that. Making money off of it. So I think it's very important that the Jews do have like some kind of a home base, just so that it's no longer a. I mean, I can go on for there are people that are gonna talk about it a little more. But speaking of the voice, though, the advocacy, it's like
The truth of Judaism. So there shouldn't be any misconceptions and anything. Yeah.
yeah, like you're acting like the lawyer, the attorney for the Jewish people. In the court of see when I'm serious, you're freaking
No, no,
crazy,
I'm
dude.
actually, I'm blown away. Kind of like, on one hand, I don't want to be like, oh no, no, that's not true, because I can see what you're saying. But on the other hand, I'm like, wow. I don't know. I hope I'm not the only one. Basically, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I know that there are many others that do this. I don't know if they do it on,
You
in
can
my
have more,
way.
you can have more than one lawyer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Like if you're the Chinese mafia, you go to court, you're gonna have multiple lawyers.
You're
I
gonna
don't
have
know. I don't, I don't,
the 20 best lawyers in the world, all lined up
yeah,
with guns
I
to
mean,
their back.
I think we need lawyers. We need people who are uh, you know uh, who speaks for the Jewish people right
And
now.
I also want to differentiate myself from other lawyers. Like Hillary Clinton was a lawyer, and she defended a pedophile after.
Well, the Jewish people are not pedophile. Well, not
Exactly, no.
pedophile.
So basically, what I'm trying to say is there's the lawyer that when he gets a case, let's say a pedophile comes running to him and says, "Please defend me in court." The lawyer's like, "No, I'm not defending you in court. You're a pedophile. I'm not gonna defend you in court. I'm sorry."
Well, there are negative sides about the Jewish people too. Obviously, I mean Jews. I don't know. I mean Jews like to talk shit about other Jews.
I
I
mean, I
think
don't know. That's family. That's typical of every group. It's typical of
yeah, like
every society.
yeah, family that doesn't fight is there something wrong? I don't know. I mean,
No, I mean
maybe there is.
okay. There's natural behavior, and
I mean, there are a
there's
lot of bad Jews
there are
out there.
things also that you can't judge a group by a few details in their behavior. The Jewish people have, I think, done a very good job of proving to the world. If you want to look at us, I mean, obviously we're not looking at Judaism, me and you, or even all the Jewish people alive today. We're looking at the history of people. We're looking at, you know, Columbus discovered America, killed millions of Indians. That was a bad idea. And if we are to, if we are to rewrite history, we wouldn't want Columbus to do what he did to the Indian people. Um, and the same thing goes for other civilizations and other points in history. You know, like the famous popular question: if you were able to take a trip back in time and kill Hitler, would you have done it? You know, um, so like Judaism for the last 2,000 years has proven itself to be a very nonviolent group. And again, I am disconnecting Judaism from Zionism or any other secret
Yeah,
organization or secret society. I'm saying pure Judaism, authentic religious Orthodox Judaism, has had a clean record of never being the aggressor and only being the victim, and many times so. So I think that if someone is looking for people that can educate the world uh, in a way that they will know how to be a peaceful society, then you can turn to Judaism for guidance, because Judaism will create a world where peace and tranquility, honesty, ethics, and morals are the backbone and the strength of every person, and every man that has moral wisdom in the Bible will be respected more. And every woman that is faithful to her husband, faithful to upbringing of the family, will be respected more in her society. And every citizen will have equal rights to choose, and the court system will be honest and truthful. And the way it will be honest and truthful is because every single citizen will be knowledgeable in the law. That means that the judge won't be able to pull a fast one on a citizen that doesn't know the law, nor will a police officer be able to pull a fast one on a citizen that is unaware of his rights. Because
I think, I think
you know,
yeah, yeah. Oh, definitely. I think it's a very interesting and admirable uh, thing that I read or heard about how ancient Israelis at one point, according to where I got this from, is that they everybody knew the law, and it's almost like Uber. It's like almost like bed and breakfast, Airbnb, bed and breakfast, where instead of relying on an external court to do the justice for you, you have your own Uber car, you have your own you pump your own gas, you do your own justice, and the way that the people do that is everybody knows the laws. I think at first it might be, or if ever at all, it might be a little bit maybe unrealistic. Not impossible, but maybe a little bit unrealistic for every single person in the world, or every culture, every country, every group in the world to be like. Which is why I think the Jews can set the example, and then whether the world want to follow suit, that's up to them. In my interpretation, that's the way it was meant to be, which is why it's not about world government. It's about world leadership and world, giving light to the world, rather than say, everybody got to do this. Now, the way to approach that with the Jewish people is that one thing with the Jewish people, you probably will agree, is that you can't make a Jew do anything. A lot of cultures in the world are like dogs. Tell them to sit, they sit. But Jews are like the stiff-necked people. They're like a cat. The only way to tame a cat is to pinch the cat by the neck, kind of. And even then, that's only like most. So it would be very artful to get the Jews to do something like that. And when it does, it'll be through freedom rather than through coercion from top down. It'll be like, I wouldn't even say it's a bottom-up thing like democracy, because that technically could be a oppression from the bottom as well. But like like the Star of David, it goes up and down, down, up, equally. Like a husband and wife equally. I mean, obviously there's an up and down, there's division of labor. Maybe the husband, go to work or stay home and things like that. But you're, so it'll be very interesting to see a future in which Jews would all be armed with the knowledge of the law and things like that. And I think it might be easier than we think it is, because we have technology. Almost every Jew should have a phone, a computer, internet access, download. It would be actually really easy, I think, to come up with an app that just helps people to get to know certain laws and guidelines, principles of law, and everything, justice, so that when there's a problem, instead of going to court and have some court, kind of tell you what to do, people solve their own problems. Although, that could be discussed with, various people. But the thing with the Jews, from an outsider's perspective, the Jews are. We talk about freedom in the United States, and there is freedom. There is a certain kind of freedom in the United States, but it's the Jewish people. It's the freedom that we're talking about here is it's almost as if it's the people who have been through slavery, who's been through oppression, and it's the chirut, that freedom from oppression that they came out of, in which it's freedom with a vengeance, and that can't be taken away.
Yeah, we appreciate it to such a deep level, and we understand its importance to such a intense degree due to the amount of oppression that we've been through. It's like basically it's like the kind of kid that he tried everything in class that gets you punished, and he got punished every single time. So they leave him back 1 year, and then he is basically the teacher's assistant now, and he's basically going around telling all the new kids, "Don't do that because then you're going to sit in the corner." And the teacher can focus on teaching a little bit more. The Jewish people are like God's, chosen child, the chosen people, and God has disciplined them, and they can tell the world what God likes and what God does not like, and they can help the world understand God and understand the Bible, and they'll save the world a lot of spiritual punishment if the world is only ready to upgrade its life into an imperial spiritual experience. And again, you said that it's very hard for all the Gentiles in the world to take everything that Judaism has to offer. Yeah, okay, fine. But we can start with the basics. We could start with the seven laws of Noah. We can give, like you said, we could translate a lot of what Judaism has into English and independently give people a different perspective. Even if it's not the right perspective, even if it's not something that lines up with your New Testament, but at least you'll see the laws of the Jews. At least you'll be familiar with their customs. And of course, like part of the seven laws of Noah doesn't say there that you have to eat kosher. But if someone is suffering from multiple diseases and he's having multiple health issues, he might
Option.
want to he might want to take a few ideas from the kosher diet, and that might help him in life. And the same thing is in all aspects of life that Judaism covers. If someone's working too hard, if someone's a workaholic, he might want to take a few ideas of how the Jewish people rest on Shabbos, on Sabbath, and not just the way the Gentiles rest on Shabbos, but how the
Well,
Jewish people rest on Shabbos. You know,
we'll just give them gefilte fish.
yeah, 3 slices gefilte fish with a carrot on top to ease
Yeah,
all your medical and kabbalistic pain.
yeah, and 2 matzo balls in the morning, 2 matzo balls in the evening, and some davening exercises.
Davening exercises, yes. Metabolistically, uh, shuckling during davening
The the
for
the the, the pressure points, acupressure points with the tefillah
to fill in, yeah,
and
to fill in acupuncture.
yeah, and it's
Oh, Xuan Li, me and you can open up a Chinese acupuncture to fill in spiritual Kabbalistic center where people pay $1,000 to put on to fill in.
I have a compound gefilte fish.
We can do, yeah, we can have a pill line of gefilte fish and matzo ball supplements. In case you didn't get enough matzo balls that day, you can take it in vitamin pills.
Good.
Vitamin gefilte fish.
Gefilte fish oil with the omega 3s.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And the mukpots. Uh,
Moroccan mukpats. What's it called? Shakshuka. Uh, with special Chinese herbs. You know what a
and
shakshuka is?
shakshuka, what is that? That's
Shakshuka
not.
is basically scrambled eggs, but with like a bunch of pepper and tomatoes and onions mixed in.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
Whatever.
Uh, Instead of having like McDonald's, we'll have like mukpots. And
Yeah, I mean McDonald's just now. There was this video that went viral. Millions of people were watching it. Um, there's a guy, a Israeli actually, a Israeli guy. You can tell from his accent. He goes into a McDonald's to eat something, and on the way in he sees a homeless guy. So he tells him, "Come inside. I'll buy you a meal." So the homeless guy is sitting there, and he buys the homeless guy a meal, and the homeless guy sitting in McDonald's with this Israeli. And all of a sudden, the manager of the McDonald's says, "Yo, this homeless guy has to leave." So the Israeli says, "Why?" He says, "Because he's a beggar and he's harassing our staff. He comes here all the time." He says, "But he's my guest. I bought him a meal. I want him to sit here and eat." So they say no, and they call the cops. And the cops come, and and what's funny is all the people in the restaurant, the manager and all the workers in the McDonald's, they're all black, and the cops are all black, and the Israeli's white. So technically, it's racism against the white guy. But anyway, moving on. Uh, at the end, he tells he they tell him, "Oh no no no!" The cops agree with McDonald's, and they say, "Yeah, you have to leave." So he says, "Okay, I'm putting this video up on Facebook, and hopefully the people around the world are going to boycott McDonald's because they're throwing homeless people out, even if they come as a guest when someone invites them to eat something." And he takes the homeless guy in his car, and he takes him for a spin, and I don't know what the rest is. But the point is that unfortunately we are seeing a true battle between good and evil. There are good cops, as you told me you've experienced in your childhood, and there are bad cops which will enforce laws such as these, which are uh, to throw homeless people out of getting service as human beings. So there's the full spectrum, and I'm not here to bash cops, and I'm not here to bash black people,
Yep.
but I am here to say that the war is on, and as you said, it's kind of a religious war. I think it's also a war of ignorance because um, there's unfortunately a very big demand for people to be informed and to be educated. Once people are educated, you'll see that people are a lot calmer, a lot, inclined to peaceful behavior and peaceful conduct. People that are ignorant are much more inclined to pick up arms and think that violence is going to solve problems, and so on and so forth. You see, there are children. There are small children with long white beards. That's
You know,
that's the point.
like there are three groups of people um, in the world that I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm getting with, but there are three languages in the world where when people talk, they sound like they're yelling, uh, and that's Chinese, Hebrew, and German. It's like I was gonna say that that Jewish people let it all out. Um, because they yell and everything. But then, yeah, the German people. But I mean, actually, the German people, I think they're actually pretty peaceful overall. They're just the German people are very, from my observation, is that they're very malleable. They're like a blank slate. Every culture that came in, they immediately adopted without any problems. Christianity came in. They're chased by the Huns or whatever. Came to the area of, you know, and Christianity came to Germany. There's no fight between their pagan religions with Christianity. And then when they came to the United States, they're very easy. They're very easy to adapt to the American culture. They brought their beers in and everything. And even Islam, um, I mean, yeah, there's some problems with even after World War II, immediately. I can't imagine with like the Iran or the Chinese or maybe the Israelis, where right after the World War II, when we took over, when we won the war, and the United States won the war in Germany. When we won the war in Germany, they immediately took the American democracy. They took American cultures and everything. So maybe there's something to it. But and again, the other languages are Chinese.
I'm very happy. It's beautiful to see that the Germans are very adaptive, and truthfully, I think till this day they are considered an extremely powerful economic force within Europe, and they are very they really set the tone for whatever happens in Europe in a lot of ways till this very day. And you can see that while the French were very weak during World War II, and they always needed reinforcements from the Germans, and the Germans were always in World War I as well. They were always the backup for all the other weaker European countries. And eventually, you see what they did in World War II. So I think the Germans, because they're so adaptive, they were able to see a lot of action, but not necessarily positive action. Um, they were also the they saw a lot of action that not necessarily is considered positive action. The Jewish people, like you said, I mean, the Jewish, Chinese, and German, you might say, have a lot of expression, but I hope that it just could be like in the body, you have the parts which are closer to the heart, or are more connected to pumping blood to the rest of the body. You have the liver, which holds the blood, if I'm not mistaken.
They're like almost like the bone marrow. They're like the stem cells that takes on whatever you give it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's almost like that.
yeah. But so
There are other allegories.
I would compare the Jewish people a little bit to the brain or to the mind of the body. I hope, because they do have direction that they can offer um, to the rest of the body, to the rest of the of to the rest of
Yeah,
humanity.
yeah. I thought about that too. It could be. I like to see the United States as the brain because it's the United States. It's all about spiritual and these kind of freedoms. I think some people might find that Israel's like the Yesod, like the Dantian, which is they call it the second brain, the gut, which is actually in martial arts is more important than the brain, I guess. It's very intuitive. It's you got a lot of like neurotransmitters
Or you're
out
saying
there,
the Jewish people are like the
serotonin.
gut feeling of the world, and sometimes you just
Yeah,
need to trust your gut.
they've been through oppression. They know what it is like to be in oppression, to be on the bottom. Literally, the gut is on the bottom.
Well, they
Your
warn
torso.
the body. They warn the body from any coming
Yeah,
dangers.
yeah. It's not so much on the bottom like the feet, where you're just being stepped upon, but it's on the bottom, as in the bottom of the torso. Uh, what else? It's also
I
a
mean, look,
basic.
these analogies. I mean, these analogies can be, you know, they're analogies, right? And in every analogy, you can always like it's just used for educational purposes, kind of, in order to make a point of like our point right now is that there has to be some kind of collaboration within the world, and we're trying to bring an awareness that people should be looking and seeking this collaboration of culture and wisdom Genghis Khan, after all the killing that he did, he was interested in creating a language. He brought many Chinese doctors and scientists, or I don't know, scientists in those days, but alchemists, um, to enhance the Khan culture, I guess, whatever, to the
Really?
Mongolian Empire. And before Genghis Khan, they didn't even have a writing. They didn't even have a read and write concept. So he got some of the wisdom from China, imported it into his culture, and he appreciated the advances in technology that his civilization experienced. Now, again, I am totally against anyone bringing about revolution through bloodshed, whether it's Washington, which was a Freemason as well, Napoleon, and other great masters of murder, rape, and every other atrocity to mankind in the name of some kind of justice. So I'm against. You see, that's why I told you I'm against cutting the flower in order to have him beautiful in my house. I am
Right.
I am about growing the garden because you never know. Once you agree that cutting the flower might be a good idea, you never know if you're the next flower that society will decide needs to be cut in order to benefit the greater good or some crap. So that's why I agree on re-education. I stress educational programs. I stress um, disgust in ignorance and admiration for wisdom. As long as people are stuck only on cliches, only on LOL and all the other algorithms of the new age, and if people can't see past the GIF, if people can't think for themselves, if people cannot make common sense conclusions, we have a problem, and that should not be admired. It should not be in style. It needs to be um, uh, helped in society.